Welcome to Extracurricular. I am your co-host, Eddie Geller.
And I am your other co-host, Stephanie Vanos, Orange County School Board member, but here I am today, as always, unofficially.
Can you do it all in one breath? Like, I'm Stephanie Vanos and I'm here unofficially. Do you want to try?
That'll be a test for next time.
Okay.
I like breathing, as you know.
You are a big fan of breathing. Yeah. I've found that to be true of you, which I don't hold against you. I mean, I do think it is arguably necessary for bodily function.
Well, thank you for recognizing that.
I mean, I don't have an MD. We had a doctor on this show, but we did not have her on to talk about breathing and its necessity.
Maybe next time.
Maybe next time. If you are new to the podcast, first of all, thank you for joining us. Do consider subscribing to the podcast and rating us 5 stars.
5 stars only.
It's my favorite part of the podcast is when you say 5 stars only. Also, I do want to say, if you're a regular listener to the podcast and when you see us and you tell us that you enjoy the podcast, just know that that means a lot to us. And like, we talk about it when after that interaction, we're like, wasn't that so wonderful when someone came up to us and told us they liked the podcast? So it's a very nice thing. And we really appreciate it.
It is true. Thank you so much for listening. And if you have ideas for episodes, please share them on our email.
Do we want to start encouraging people to start pitching us ideas?
I think so. We are a people of the people.
No, I love ideas from people. I'm being facetious.
But will you check the email?
I will check the emails. I'm always checking the emails. Folks are very kind in our email inboxes, so thank you for sending us email at podcastextracurricular@gmail.com. Do you want to take turns checking the emails?
No, I do not.
Let's talk about today's show. What a fabulous guest, a guest that we've been waiting to have on for a while. Do you want to talk about our podcast guest today?
Yes, today we have Liz Barker. Liz Barker is a school board member from Sarasota County, Florida. And we actually ran for office at the same time. We were both...
Not against each other.
Not against each other. That's true, because I am in Orange County and she is in Sarasota County. But we were both kind of first-time candidates, and you just kind of had a background in public education advocacy. Obviously, you know, my background was sort of in the legal background, and Liz was a school psychologist, so different backgrounds. But yeah, she just became such a good friend. We went through a lot together. I feel like she's also a mom. She has 4 kids, so she's outdoing me.
But it's not a competition because you didn't run against her.
That is true.
But if you did run against Liz, what would your line of attack be?
Oh, wait, but I don't know. That's a great question. There's nothing to attack Liz on because she's so wonderful. Truly, she's so smart. She's so calm. She is such a strong advocate, and just a really likable person.
Yeah, and
fun fact, we share a birthday.
What?
Yes.
I didn't realize that.
We do. We share a birthday.
Because I sent Liz flowers and I called her. Now I'm realizing I did nothing for your birthday. Oh my gosh. Well,
now next year you'll remember that Liz's birthday is also my birthday. So yeah, we've got some Libra energy here.
I love it. Well, okay, that was a fun little joke I did, but I don't want to encourage bad behavior in men, like not knowing when their partner's birthday is. So I did remember your birthday.
Or in anybody. Anybody should remember when their partner's birthday is. And you know what? Anybody can get flowers. And I will say, you gave me beautiful flowers for my birthday, but you were having a bad day a couple of days ago, and I brought you flowers because they just make people feel better.
And I did feel better when you brought me those flowers, and that was so thoughtful of you. Thank you so much. That was actually on Yom Kippur when I told the story about how I did not get to temple, even though I tried very hard. So it was, Yom Kippur, a day of atonement, but so you're kind of supposed to feel bad, but you brought me the flowers, and I felt so much better. So thank you for the flowers.
Wait, did I ruin Yom Kippur?
No, you did not.
Were you supposed to be feeling bad all day?
I mean, a little bit, but you're supposed to be reflective, of, what, the sins you've committed in the past year. But, if your partner brings you flowers on Yom Kippur, you got to take, that's God's plan. You know what I mean?
I love it. Well, truly though, Liz was a great guest. We so much enjoyed talking to her.
Great job bringing it back.
She's so knowledgeable, and we talk about Schools of Hope, which you may have seen in the headlines in the past week or two.
There have been a lot of headlines about it, and the day this podcast comes out, we're also releasing a video. I say you're releasing a video on your Instagram account, Vote Vanos, and people should also check out your page, Vote Vanos. They should also check out our page, podcast, no, extracurricular _ podcast. Got to keep track of all the social media handles and email addresses. But we did a video, you did a video on Schools of Hope that I want people to check out. And so we thought Liz was a perfect guest because Liz wrote a fantastic op-ed a few weeks ago. So she's very versed on these Schools of Hope. And I think the phrase, and she mentioned it and we elevated it during the conversation about these being a hostile takeover of schools, a privately funded, for-profit, hostile takeover of schools. So listen to this conversation. Liz is from Sarasota, but this is applicable to the state of Florida. And if you're outside the state of Florida, like so many things, Florida is a test case for what, folks are trying to do across the country to public education. So I think there's a lot to learn from this, whether like whatever county you're in, whatever state you're in. And she's just wonderful to talk to. And she was fabulous.
True, she was. And what happens in Florida is going to happen to you. So there's that too.
That is very ominous.
Yeah.
But also correct. One thing I clocked when we were talking to Liz is she talks about her legislative agenda, which we're going to link to in the podcast notes. She's like, you can go to our legislative agenda and you can print them out. And all I could think of is like, Steph's not going to print it out because she won't use the printer that I lent her to print things. Steph, what is your beef with printing things?
So it's not just about printing things, but I think the general thing is every time you use something, it's one time closer to breaking. And I truly, and it's funny because that's not something I came up with. One of my good friends from high school, that was something that he would say, like every time I would roll down a window in the car, he'd be like, that's one time closer to breaking, Stephanie. And so that's how I think of everything now. You use a toaster, one time closer to breaking. You use the printer, one time closer to breaking. You roll down the window in your car, one time closer to breaking. So I feel like I need to like save it for, when I really need the printer.
What do you think that occasion is going to be that you really need to use the printer?
I don't know. Am I a hoarder?
No, you're not. You're the opposite of a hoarder because you won't print any papers to hoard.
Well,
maybe you're hoarding the toner that is in the printer. But I was just like, we had an occasion this past week in which you were like, oh, I have to go run back to the office because I printed something there. And I was like, you have this printer that I lent you because I never use it. And I was like, why don't you just print your printer? And you're like, well, that's one step closer to breaking. And anyway, I love you so much, but also that hurt me a little bit.
And I do just want to point out that I was printing out something for work. So that's why I was printing it out at work. It was for my town hall. So I wasn't just printing out random things. So I want people to understand that I'm not misusing taxpayer funds for the printer. It was for the town hall on Tuesday, which was great, by the way. You came out and I appreciate that.
Well, it was a wonderful town hall. Let's talk about that in a second. But also, I don't think anyone suspected that you were like printing, concert tickets on OCPS, or your novel that you've been writing. Though you should write a novel, and you can use the printer that you have in this house to print your novel.
Oh my gosh, I am so uncreative. My oldest daughter is the novel writer. She will be a publisher. I'm telling you, she is so talented, but it is not my gift. So, all right, well, but speaking of gifts,
okay,
let's talk about last night.
Last night was wonderful, and I do want to get back to your town hall. So we talked about this last week. I had an improv show at the Commodore Theater in Tampa, and we invited this brilliant, funny woman, Tampa Bree, who has this amazing Instagram account. People should check it out, Tampa_Bree. She does these hilarious sort of showings, I guess, of the houses that she's selling. But she kind of makes fun of the houses and just does... I feel so dumb because I'm a comedian and I'm talking about another comedian and I'm being very clinical about it. But you should watch her videos. She's very funny and makes fun of the houses and makes fun of the people that may inhabit them with the consent of the people who are selling the house. Anyway, she's got a big following. We asked her to come do the show at the Commodore. She came to do the show. So she was interviewed and we did scenes about her stories and her life story. And she was so funny and the improv was really good. Did you have a great time?
I did. I have to say, all of the performers, like you and the team at the Commodore, no, team is the wrong word. That's very athletic sounding.
The cast,
team
maybe.
Cast. I feel like you were all on last night. You were just all 100% on. And it was really one of the best shows. I feel like you all worked so well off of each other. I mean, there was good, funny material, of course, from Bree, but I feel like your work was all just so, you just did a great job. And it was very funny and very entertaining. Everyone was on, and it was just a really fun night.
Oh, thank you. Do you feel like me being on is like a rare occasion, or...
See, I knew I was going to get that. You compliment someone, and then they're like, "Wait, when am I not on?" No, and actually, I will say it was a really good group too, a really strong group last night. Because sometimes people are in and out. Everyone is very. I'm going to stop talking. Everyone is very good, but it was just it just clicked. Sometimes it just clicks more than other times, and you really clicked last night.
Well, there's a profound book that says, everyone is equal, but some are more equal than others. And I think that is very much, an ethos that I think we all should be aspiring to in 2025, is some are more equal than others.
Yeah, I'm not signing on to that. I'm going to be very clear.
Okay, well, speaking of things we don't want to sign on to, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about the show, but it was interesting. We talked about this a bit on the ride home. In the improv show, Bree had remarked that the lights were very bright because it's a stage. If you go on stage, the lights are going to be bright. That's what they're there for. And she joked that it felt like an ICE interrogation, which is a dark joke, but it was like darkly funny. And then we did a scene based on that. One of my fellow performers, Danny, who's so funny, did a scene where he was applying for a job at ICE and was doing Shakespearean monologues to get his job, which again, darkly funny. But the point I bring this up and why I spend time talking about it on this podcast is really one of the first opportunities that in a public space to feel the reaction from the crowd about what ICE is doing in the form of watching comedy. It's almost hard to describe, but it's like we're all on the same page about the disgusting nature of these apprehensions and kidnappings by masked men. And I think it was kind of the first time to be in a group of people where we all just kind of understood like, oh yeah, we're making fun of this, but this is really dark and we're all really upset about it. And I think to feel that from everyone was like both cathartic and upsetting at the same time. But I thought it was just powerful. And, I'm not saying I make profound art all the time. You've seen me do a lot of dumb jokes on stage, and I love doing dumb jokes. But occasionally I think it really brings something to light, brings truth to light that I think is important.
Yeah, and I thought that was a really interesting scene, a really good scene. And I would say that when you said the audience was kind of all on the same page and with it, I would say the audience was certainly not monolithic by any stretch. I think it's, it's not just, this was some kind of like political gathering of people from one political party and not the other political party. I feel like it was a very just like wide group of people, but that we can all kind of see that same conclusion, I think was really telling.
Yeah. So thank you. All right. The other thing I do want to talk about, because we mentioned it, I had my show, my time to shine. You had your time to shine this week. You did a town hall. You've been talking about doing this town hall for a while, about the budget. Can you talk just for a couple minutes about what that was? It was great. I was there. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Tell us a little bit about what you talked about.
First of all, I love your transition that you compare your comedy improv to my budget town hall, because which one would you rather go to? Comedy improv or budget town hall for education?
It was a fabulous town hall. You were on.
No, actually, I mean, all joking aside, I like to do really boring things. And so really one of my goals was to do a budget town hall, because I feel like I just want people, again, I think of where I was when I was not on the school board. I was, just a member of the community, a parent who wanted to understand more. I wanted to understand the way things worked. I wanted to understand why things were funded and things weren't funded. I wanted to understand where the money was coming from. I wanted to understand where the shortfalls were. And so, we all bring our own perspectives, right? And so that is something that I wanted to share with my District 6 community. And so, so we had a town hall at Audubon K8 in the Media Center. So lovely of them to stay late and to share their space with us. But it was great. And we had some, Lauren and Lisa from the communications at the district came and helped, which was wonderful. We had translators there, and really just kind of shared with the stakeholders that attended, how the schools were funded, where we were experiencing shortfalls this year, and then, what some of the challenges our public schools are facing. And then we just allowed them an opportunity to ask questions, and just literally like old school, like raise hand, ask a question. You didn't have to put it in a thought exchange or anything like that, or submit questions beforehand. We could just have a kind of informal conversation about it. And I thought it was really good. And I think I'm really thankful for the people who showed up. And, as we talk a little bit about in the show today, people were really outraged when they heard about, the taxpayer funded vouchers and the amount of taxpayer money that is being funneled to those schools. And when they heard about Schools of Hope, and really, honestly, you said it, really in disbelief of what was happening in our state.
Well, and just to quickly make a connection, like you talked about the improv show not being monolithic, your town hall also was not a monolith. And I think from a couple of the questions, it was across the spectrum, and everyone, I think, was... if not everyone, felt like almost everyone was just like, again, in shock at like what is happening with taxpayer money and what is happening with our schools. And it's a testament to how powerful these public education issues are and how much work needs to go into letting people know what's going on and what's happening. And I thought, of course, you did such a great job communicating it. I mean, could it have used a couple of improv scenes? Maybe. Was it the place for that? Probably not. But, if you call on me to do some scenes, I will step up.
And you know who won't step up? Me.
You'd be great, though.
Okay. So we did one other thing actually last weekend after we recorded. We went to go see a show. And it was The Diary of Anne Frank, and it was put on by a local group here in Orlando. And they performed at Ecoe High School. We both had the opportunity to go see it, and really a powerful take, and I think a really, really well done version of this story. Yeah,
and there was a multimedia aspect to it, because you kind of had this, dramatization of Anne Frank's experience in hiding, along with her family and the other family and other people who were in there with her. But there was also video on screen that accompanied it to help emphasize, the mood at the time and how scary this was. And I found it, the phrase I used to describe it, I found it very nourishing. I think a lot of us hopefully know the story of Anne Frank and understand generally, what happened with her and her diary. But I think to see it on stage was just, again, very powerful. I found myself tearing up a number of times. And I think at the end, when they dramatized the Nazis coming in with their guns to, take the family away, most of them to their death, it is hard not to feel the parallels in this moment. And it didn't need to be said that this is not a production that is about the current moment, and it is also absolutely about this current moment in time. And so it was very powerful, and I hope more people get to see it. Because to understand our history is the lens in which we need to understand what we're fighting in this moment here in America and across the globe.
So well said. So thank you. The Bridge Theater is the group that put this performance on. And so thank you for the invitation to come out and check it out.
And the last thing I want to say is we actually talked to someone from the Holocaust Center who was out there and talked about how there are now principals in the system who are advising their teachers to teach the Holocaust from less of an emotional storytelling perspective and more of a facts and figures perspective. Am I describing that right from what you heard?
Yeah, and I don't remember if he actually said principals, but I think the bottom line is there are teachers who are afraid to actually just teach the Holocaust, to teach about it and to teach about the impact of the Holocaust. And I think that is really disturbing and speaks to sort of the culture of fear that is permeating in our schools, that like we had this horrible, stain in our world history, and some are afraid to talk about it.
If you go to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., you'll see this sign that has the early warning signs of fascism that include things like powerful and continuing nationalism, disdain for human rights, identification of enemies as a unifying cause, controlled mass media. So to teach history, to teach the Holocaust as it happened and to talk about what led to it, it is, again, it's impossible to not see the signs of this same sort of fervor happening in the current moment. And so there are people who do not want that connection made for obvious reasons. And I think both like nefariously, and also I think they're probably in denial as well. But it is upsetting to hear that. And yeah, so I encourage anyone to go see the play that has an opportunity to see it if you're here.
Yep, I think that's perfect.
Okay, enough about World War II and the Holocaust. Let's go to another less disturbing but still very upsetting subject, which is Schools of Hope, with a very delightful and uplifting human being, school board member Liz Barker.
Welcome to the podcast, Liz Barker. Liz is a school board member in Sarasota County. She was elected actually the same time that I was, in August of 2024. I met Liz on the campaign trail, and we bonded very quickly. And it was just nice to have a like-minded person running at the same time as me. We could share some of the highs and lows together. And I'm just so grateful that you have taken the time to be on our podcast today. Liz is also a mom of 4 kids. And so I know it's busy and it takes time out of your weekend to be here. So really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me. I've been wanting to be on this podcast forever. So this is a big deal.
Before we get into the conversation today, I was hoping you could give the listeners a little bit of background on yourself and how you got into being involved with our public schools and why you decided to run for school board.
Sure. So I am a school board member now in Sarasota, Florida. But prior to that, I was a public school psychologist, and I was sort of in the same career trajectory that a lot of our peers are, where eventually we start having children and realize that the public school salary, we can't afford our daycare anymore. And so I took a step back from my role as a school psychologist and became your typical PTO mom, school advisory committee. You could take the school psych out of the girl, but you can't take her out of the school. So I was in the schools all the time with my kids and doing reading groups with other people's kids, and just generally being an involved parent. And eventually I realized that there was really a void, at least on our school board. We didn't have any parents of students who were actually attending our public schools on our school board, not one. And I felt like in a state that promotes parent rights and school choice, that was a really important voice that was missing from our board. So I ran, and now I'm here.
You ran against an incumbent and you won, which is so exciting.
I did.
Yeah, very exciting.
Thank you. A DeSantis endorsed incumbent.
Yep, very, very impressive. And I love what you say. I think there is something about having parents of kids in public school on school boards, because you just have a different perspective. And, I'll have people from the district will tell me that, like you, I have children in the schools, and you just bring a different perspective. You kind of bring, and he describes it as like the end user perspective, like how we see it from the people who are utilizing versus how maybe people in the district see things as they're, putting policies into place and sort of putting rules and everything into place. So I think it's a really important perspective.
I think also it's interesting when we're being really nudged, is a gentle way of saying it, but we're being nudged in a direction of being more competitive and business-minded in the way that we run our schools. You have to have the lens of a consumer who can bring some of that conversation to the table as well.
So the conversation we want to have today is about Schools of Hope. But before we dig deep, I want to make sure everybody understands what we mean by Schools of Hope. So Liz, can you tell us, what is a School of Hope?
Schools of Hope are charter school groups that have been designated by the state of Florida as Hope Schools. This program has been in effect for a couple years now, but there were only a handful of schools across the state because the stated intent of the Schools of Hope was to come and save these underperforming public schools. And so there were clear definitions about what a persistently underperforming school was. And then there were these Hope operators that the state of Florida approved that could have access to various grants and other ways of borrowing money that were supposed to be able to come in and provide a better option for these students who had been underserved by their public schools. It has been generally considered to be a failed experiment. The one district where School of Hope operator came in and took over the whole district was Jefferson County. They had been a persistently underperforming school district for several years. The Hope operator came in, and initially they did have some success. They went from an F to a C in that first year. But then with the successive years, the school couldn't maintain that level of success. It was really a tragedy for the students involved. Eventually, their scores plummeted, and after 5 years, the Hope operator did not choose to renew their contract. They left. They left those families. They left those students. They left that school district. The moral of the story is that it didn't work. And it makes no sense to me to take something that failed and then try to force it on highly performing school districts. So the new legislation that came out now says that you do not have to be an underperforming school in order to be eligible for a School of Hope operator to come in and co-locate with you on your property. You just need to have open seats. You have to be under enrolled. What that looks like is not spelled out at all. So it doesn't matter if you have 10 seats or you have 500 seats. A charter operator could make the argument that you have room for them. And it has absolutely nothing to do anymore with academic achievement. It's just simply a way for these charter school operators, and the one that is currently sending out notices is a for-profit charter company that takes our tax dollars and then uses them to make a profit, to come in and utilize our taxpayer built and owned public schools for free. Essentially, they squat in these buildings, and then in their co-location, they are allowed to use all of our resources: transportation, food and nutrition, safety and security, all at no cost to them. And they get to decide which schools they come into, where they are going to set up shop. It's really a very predatory model of education. And my biggest concern is that the track record of these Hope operators is mediocre at best. At best, that is being generous. And I believe for a highly functioning school district to have these folks come in and try to take over their resources and buildings for a really mediocre outcome for our students is just absolutely unacceptable.
Yeah, I think that's a great point when, just talking about the outcome. I mean, obviously what happened in Jefferson County is such a tragedy and speaks to when a charter school's done, like they can leave. They can pick up and leave, and they're gone. And I think from what we've seen from the charter schools in Miami-Dade County, our district shared that I think the average grade of the charter student is a C. And I don't know, I'm curious to know how many schools in Sarasota County were D or F schools this year?
None.
Mm-hmm. So you have to wonder, well, I have ideas of why they want to be in Sarasota County, to kind of trade off of some of the, the great, strong school community that Sarasota, Public Schools has built. But it just really speaks to what the goal is.
Well, we actually just made this video that'll be out the day this podcast is releasing. And in the video, Steph quotes your phrase that this is about control and profit, which I thought was so powerful that you put in that piece, and just succinctly gets to the point what this is about. Because I think one of the things I bring to this podcast is my ignorance. And so for a lot of education issues, I did not have the breadth of understanding that the two of you have had. And so sometimes, you'd hear what innovations, a dreaded word in education a lot of times, because it's cover for-profit schemes. But, I would hear some of these things. I'd be like, okay, maybe that makes sense. Maybe it's helpful. But it's really elucidating to hear you both talk about this in such real terms. It's like, they are coming to make more money. They've expanded the criteria in which they can enter schools, and they're going to leech off your resources to make profit. And if they want to be like, peace out, they can do that. And it's not a problem. So I just wanted to highlight that part of your op-ed because it was so sharp.
And don't worry, I quoted you specifically.
We did mention you.
Well, thank you.
Of course.
So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, Liz, because you wrote an excellent piece in your local newspaper about Schools of Hope. And Schools of Hope, there was recent legislation passed at the end of this past legislative session, but we're starting to really feel the impacts of it now. And you, like I said, wrote a great piece. So I just wanted to kind of throw it over to you to kind of share what's going on in Sarasota County and what you're seeing in your community.
So I wrote the op-ed actually several weeks ago before the Matter Academy began peppering the state of Florida with their notices that they wanted to occupy our buildings. I wrote it because I had been watching the last legislative cycle very, very closely. And when I saw this legislation come through in the final budget bill, it was hidden in there. It was a concept that had actually died earlier in the legislative session. And the initial bill, even that had been proposed that died, was very, very different from what came to us in the budget at the 9th hour, at the 12th hour. And I knew that the State Board of Education was scheduled to begin making rules around how districts were going to implement this new legislation. And I knew that that was happening quickly. And in our district, we have about 50% of our schools that are under-enrolled. And fairly significantly so. We run a lot of specialized programs. And so we don't always just use our classrooms and have 20 to 25 students in each one. We do a lot of really interesting things around STEAM and around career and tech ed that use our spaces in more creative ways. So I suspected once I saw this legislation come out that Schools of Hope were going to want to take advantage of Sarasota, not just because we have the open space, but because we are an A-rated district and have been for decades now. We have a referendum and we have a community that is really, really invested in public education, and who wouldn't want to take advantage of that? So I was, and I know that my superintendent shared that concern, and he was already making plans about how do we reimagine some of these buildings to ensure optimum capacity. What that looked like originally was potentially having to close one of our elementary schools. We had 4 elementary schools in a 4-mile radius that were all under-enrolled, and they were our most under-enrolled schools. And knowing that this legislation was coming down the pike and it could have very real consequences for our families, I wanted to make sure that the community knew what was going on, that this was not something that the school district wants to do. No one ever wants to close their neighborhood public school. It's an awful thing to even have to talk about. And I felt really strongly that taxpayers should understand what's going on here with their tax dollars. And so I wrote that piece to try to help folks understand the history of Schools of Hope and what that could look like for us. And then sure enough, just a couple weeks later, these notices began flying in.
I also wanted to ask, how many of these notices have you all received, and have you approved any of them yet?
We received 3 notices, and it's really interesting to me, the 3 schools that they chose. They chose one of our schools, which serves only students with severe disabilities. They also chose our historically Black elementary school that is really, they messed with the wrong parents on that one, because those parents, they love Emma E. Booker Elementary, and the whole community is so proud of that school. But I think, they thought they could come in and trick people into falling for this scheme. And they miscalculated on a grand scale with that one. And then they also chose one of our middle schools. So we received 3 notices, and yes, technically all of those buildings do have fewer than the max enrollment, but all of the space is being utilized. It may look different, but it's absolutely being utilized. And they really jumped the gun because it has only been 14 days since the Board of Education voted on the new rule, but the rule hasn't even gone into effect yet. And they really need to wait 14 days until after the rule goes into effect. So as of right now, we are rejecting all of these notices on the grounds that they were submitted too early. They're not valid. So any Hope operators are going to have to resubmit after November 11th.
Yeah. And I just want to clarify. So when these schools that they're looking to co-locate in, they are not persistently low performing schools, correct?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
They are solid B schools. And for our students with disabilities, obviously that's a different metric, but these schools have been serving students very, very well for a long time.
But the reason that these schools were able to be targeted by the Hope operators is because they're within 5 miles of, is it because they're an opportunity zone? Is it because they're within 5 miles of the new definition of low performing schools? Why are they allowed to be in those schools, or why do they think they're allowed to operate in those schools?
So it's interesting, the statute does talk about these opportunity zones, but then when you actually dig into the rule that the State Board of Education made and the way that the law is written, the opportunity zones really don't matter. The Hope operator can decide for whatever reason any school isn't a good option for them. Maybe they don't like the color of the carpet. Maybe they, don't want to drive that far from their house. I don't know. They can make any choice about why one school is better than another school. Emma E. Booker so our opportunity zones, we actually don't have any schools in an opportunity zone.
Oh.
But Emma E. is closest, I guess, maybe to one of those. So perhaps they thought that was a good place to start. But again, there's the way that the law is written is so open-ended. There are no guardrails at all. And that leaves it open to interpretation. And it's very clear that the charter schools right now have the upper hand in terms of where they want to co-locate, what that looks like, and we're allowed to say, here's another alternative. Would you prefer this school? This school actually has more space than this school. And they can say, sure, that sounds great, or no, thank you. We're coming and we're squatting right here.
And we really have no ability to say no. I mean, I guess you could offer alternatives, but you have to accept it, or your district stands to lose, the administrative fees. And I know for Orange County, that's millions of dollars in, our charter administrative fees that we stand to lose if we deny these notices of intent.
Yep, absolutely. And the state has shown repeatedly no willingness to work with the public school districts on trying to find alternate solutions to housing these charter schools. And again, I think it's so important for parents to know that this now has nothing to do with academic achievement. Mm-hmm. Absolutely nothing. Mm-hmm. These schools are really, really mediocre and underperform where our local public schools do regularly. In Sarasota County, we have several charters already. We have some great homegrown ones that are community driven and community led, and they offer a service that we can't currently provide in our public schools, and they are wonderful partners to us. We're so grateful for them. And we do also already have some of these for-profit cut and paste cookie cutter charters, and Sarasota County Public Schools outperforms them by a very large margin year after year after year. So to come in and say, we're going to bring the hope to you, just rings so false.
Well, I'm sure someone's hopeful. It's just not students. Perhaps for-profit companies, for vendors, curriculum providers, builders. I think there are some people who are hopeful. It's just not students, not communities.
Maybe I'm painting with too broad of a brush, though I don't think so. But when you try and do education that is for profit, like you're inherently just not going to be able to outperform public schools who are not incentivized by profit, who are incentivized to serve all students, to do the best for students and the communities. And when you're just trying to find ways to make money, you're like, that's just not what this entire enterprise, if you can call it that, of educating our youth and being pillars of the community. It's just not about profit. And it's just, so you just can't compete against, like a true community effort to educate and to do well by students. But they sure try.
And not only that, but I think it's interesting that they did pull out, that the Schools of Hope did pull out of Jefferson County. I mean, they probably recognized that I know there was an influx of funding initially to kind of get these charter schools started, these Schools of Hope started, but that it takes a lot of money to serve areas that have students that need a lot of extra help. They need extra funding, they need extra resources, and it's just not as profitable. And so, I think that's one reason why they didn't last there, and they didn't really make any kind of, overall improvement.
I think that's also why they're targeting Sarasota County. We have a very strong tax base, and on top of that, we have community members who vote repeatedly for referendum dollars to supplement that tax base. And so, listen, this is a great payday. Our land is worth a lot, and if you're going to come in, co-locate with a school, and then literally in their notices that they sent out, they're hoping within 5 years to take over the entire school. They want the entire enrollment. So then what does that look like? Then our school district, our taxpayers, are footing the bill for the operation of the buildings. Again, food, nutrition, busing, safety and security, all of that. And at some point that becomes untenable. So then what happens? Then we're forced to sell the building or forced to sell the land. Who has first right of refusal when a school district is selling land?
Charter schools, perhaps?
Correct. Ding, ding, ding. You're right. So then we have, it's such a naked land grab. It's a blatant land grab, resource grab, money grab, where then these schools can force the sale of this building at a lower price, buy it up, and make a profit that way as well. Some of them even lease it back to themselves then to continue the whole cycle of money making. And to me, that's outrageous. It's just outrageous.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of charter schools generally is, that they can say they're a not-for-profit charter school, but they're connected to the people that own the land that they're on, and they are paying, those lease payments to be on that property. And so I think we just have to be skeptical of real estate developers and companies like that who are associated with charter schools, and just to make sure that we really keep an eye on that big picture. Some of the, like I said, Schools of Hope sounds great when, the title of it sounds wonderful, but when you really peel it back, it's hard to escape this. But I did also want to talk about, so it's not just that these schools can co-locate, they also have access to just other district property. Right. So if, like you said, and I don't know if this was part of your description, but let's say you're using one of your district buildings for, some other purpose, adult education or VPK or, SLP or, some kind of therapy or something like that these schools can come in and they can also, use, I guess co-locate, or if it's vacant, can use those schools as well.
Right. And we have no vacant schools, so they have to co-locate. And here's another piece of it. They want a contiguous footprint, which means that we will be required, if they come in to co-locate with us, to move classrooms around into one side of the building to create a contiguous footprint for this charter to operate. And again, it's another way to make teachers uncomfortable, families uncomfortable, students uncomfortable, enough to the point that hopefully the end goal is to take over the building as a whole.
So I can't believe that the Hope operator comes in and it's not just that they can operate rent free and get all of these free services, by the way, sharing gyms, auditoriums, parking lots, all of those spaces, cafeterias, but that their use of the building is also prioritized over the public school that is already in the building. This is, I mean, I just don't know how parents and communities will stand for this once they see this happening. And I think that we need them to rise up and to make sure their lawmakers know that they see what this is. This is a money grab. This is just another way to try to hit public education and to speak up about it.
And this is why I say it really is, I don't know a better way to explain. It is a hostile takeover of community-owned property across the state, period. And folks need to understand that.
Yep. Oh, quick question. We didn't talk about this. So the teachers in these schools, are they required to be certified? Do they have to be certified teachers in these Hope schools?
No, they don't. And again, I would point to their very lackluster academic outcomes versus the public schools, where we have stringent requirements for all of our teachers that are mandated by the state, and then continue to go through this cycle of continuous learning. We have our shared vision and mission. We have incredible supports at the district level to continue enhancing our instructional technique and our instructional output. So of course they have worse outcomes. It just makes sense.
And your public tax dollars are paying for it.
That's correct.
It's almost like there's a reason this bill was passed the last day of the special session.
Well, for sure. And I mean, because it was passed in that budget bill, it avoided all committee hearings. It avoided really public scrutiny. I mean, they were trying to get this by everybody, and they did.
Absolutely. And it was the original suggestion was brought by Ken Griffin, who is a billionaire who recently moved to Miami from up north. And it's very clear that this is something that he was wanting to push through that is deeply unpopular with parents and community members as a whole. I don't care where you stand politically. When folks threaten your child's neighborhood public school, you're going to hear from us. Parents do not like that. And we're absolutely already building a coalition across the state of parents who are ready to let Tallahassee know how much we do not like this.
Heck yeah.
Liz, I just can't thank you enough for how informed you are. Like I said, Steph obviously knows a hell of a lot more than I do, but we've been working on this, explainer and doing a lot of research, but even talking to you, do you just you have so much information on this, and I'm so glad we're talking to you, because it is, even going into this conversation, I was like, this is fucking terrible. And now I'm like, oh my God, it's even really worse than that. Yeah.
Yes, it really is.
Yeah.
I think the phrase you use of hostile takeover is really important, and I'm glad you said it.
Yeah, and I think it isn't.
Need to understand.
Yeah. And I think it's, having that perspective of having these schools that have already applied to co-locate in your schools. We at Orange County, we have not yet had that. But I think once people realize that they're coming for your school, for your child's school, and again, it could be an elementary school that has high school School of Hope students in it. There's nothing that says they can't do that. There's so much. And again, these shared spaces, discipline, behavior. I mean, there's so much that I think once parents realize they're coming for you, this could be at any school. And I think it also speaks to the importance of making sure that we're being smart about rezoning, and that we're being smart about how we are, maybe having to consolidate schools. Again, a terrible discussion no one wants to have. No one likes that. It's uncomfortable. It's just not easy. But, that by doing that, we can also keep our students kind of in their schools, prevent this hostile takeover, as you say, and make sure that our students are safe and are learning.
Absolutely. And I think also school boards in general, districts in general, are going to be forced to move quicker than we would like to. As school districts, we've generally had the luxury of being able to roll things out on a more reasonable timeline. We like to get input from the community. We like to think through all our options, and that is the best way to go about decision making. Absolutely. But I caution folks that in this new environment, school districts are going to be forced to make decisive, swift decisions in order to protect our students and our families and our taxpayer resources.
Which is probably not going to go over well in communities, right? When decisions are made quickly and people feel like maybe they're not informed, they don't have all the details, they didn't see this coming, because you have to do a little research to figure out what is really behind these schools of hope. I mean, and kind of understand how it's changed and how the legislation has just made it so easy for this to happen, which then kind of falls back on, honestly, making school districts look kind of like the bad guys, even though we're forced in this situation to have to respond quickly and to not have the kind of community conversations that we want to have, and to, in order really to protect the students.
Absolutely. It's all very calculated across the board. And I think that as we begin to show that to people will become more and more enraged because like I said, everything's all fine and dandy until you threaten your child's neighborhood public school. And then you have the moms and dads and grandmas and aunties and uncles who are coming for you.
Yep.
And some boyfriends.
Exactly.
Yes, those two.
They're mad. They're angry.
They're really mad.
Well, Liz, you have done a great job of ringing the bells before I think other people were really paying attention. So thank you so much for doing that. There's so much happening, and it's hard for any one of us school board members to be on top of every single thing. So I'm so thankful that you were on top of this and you were speaking out early and had, articulated your thoughts so clearly. But for people listening who are concerned, and I know they're out there, I just had a town hall last week, and when parents heard about this, they were angry and they were ready. So
and in disbelief.
Yeah, they were in disbelief that this was actually happening. So if there's someone out there who wants to take action and wants to help and kind of fight back against this, what can they do?
Absolutely. So find your local pro-public education group. Wherever you are in the state, there are lots of them. And as I said, there are now parents forming pro-public education groups that are bipartisan across the aisle. So don't feel like you have to be on one side or another politically. It doesn't matter. When they come for your school, they come for your school. So start to find and build those coalitions. And it's really incredibly important. We're about to go into the next legislative cycle. So you can look up online who your state rep is for your area in both the House and the Senate and reach out to them and say very clearly, we do not want these schools of hope coming in and preying on our students and taking our resources. You need to either repeal this bill or put in some common sense guardrails. And Sarasota County as a district has already made some recommendations for some common sense guardrails, particularly around what does underused or vacant mean. So just similar to the definition of persistently underperforming, we should have a definition for persistently underused. It should be less than 50% capacity for the 3 of the last 5 years, something like that. Even putting some guardrails in place to really make sure that these schools of hope are not coming in and taking advantage of highly performing schools is really, really important. So you have to reach out to your state rep and make your voice heard.
I have to say, I did see the platform that you all submitted, and it was really, really impressive. Is that...
sorry, what platform? Just so...
I'm sorry, the legislative platform for Sarasota County, and you're really on top of kind of getting that kind of communication out. Is that something that is public? I mean, I know everything is public, but is that something that people could go on a website and see what that platform is, just so they understand exactly what you're asking? Because I think there's kind of two parts. There's, let's protect our students and our taxpayer funds and resources, and we don't want these schools of hope in our traditional schools. And then there's also, if you're not going to repeal this horrible law, then we need to do X, Y, and Z. And if people maybe had talking points, that might be easier for them to ask of their lawmakers. So is that something that's public, or can it be?
It absolutely is. And it's something I'm really proud of. So I would love anyone to go check it out. And if you go to SarasotaCountySchools.net, you can search for our legislative priorities for 2026, and it is right there for you. You can print it out. It also has information about how vouchers are draining funds from our public schools and some of our recommendations around that. So I think it is a really helpful document if you're looking for specific talking points when you're reaching out to legislators.
And we could talk about vouchers, taxpayer funded vouchers, as you know, on a whole other podcast, and we probably will, to be honest. But for now, I think that's great. Can we link to that in the show notes?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We will link to it.
So people can see that. And thank you for being on top of this, and thank you for sharing that information. And I'll be right there with you. So, and parents, if you have questions, I'm sure you can email Liz, you can email me, and we can connect you to local groups that are advocating, and find out what you want to do and how you want to help.
Okay, Liz, one thing I have to ask about is you won your election, you defeated your opponent, the incumbent, and now she has been reappointed to the school board from Ron DeSantis. Can you tell us what happened there?
So we have a 5-person board, and one of my fellow board members was our prior chief of school security, and then quit that job to be able to be on the school board. So his heart is very much with safety and security. So we had an opening on it for that position again, and he chose to leave the board and go back to that position. And he's doing an excellent job because that is what he's good at. That is his true love. But that left us with an opening on our school board, and Governor DeSantis appointed my opponent that I defeated in the last election to that seat. So now we get to sit next to each other on Tuesdays, and it's lovely.
I wanted folks to know how politics can work in Florida. And then even when you lose an election, Governor DeSantis can just make sure you get right back into whatever position you were seeking, or a higher position.
Right. I mean, you lose a school board race, you get to become part of the Board of Education. So, it's that's just kind of how it works here. Well, you're a bigger person than I, Liz, because I would be putting whoopee cushions. You probably would be. And I also want to say one thing I loved your kind of tagline when you were running, and I know that's still what you abide by now as a school board member, which I appreciate, which is community over chaos. And despite all of the obstacles and flames that are being thrown in your way and in your direction and at Sarasota County, in particular, you just have this ability to stay calm. And that doesn't mean that you're not a fighter, and it doesn't mean that you will not stand up and fight hard for the students, but it's in a community forward way, and I just love that about you. So just want to say I love the community over chaos. So thank you.
Thank you. I think it's going to only become increasingly important as we enter into this next phase.
Absolutely.
The community comes together.
For sure. Well, I feel lucky that I get to maybe not serve on the same board as you, but we get to serve together on different boards, which is great because we can talk to each other and sunshine does not apply to us, which is wonderful. So, so thank you for serving, and I'm glad I get to serve along with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, y'all.
Oh, this was so fun. It was a long time coming, and now we got to get Rebecca on.
Yes.
So we got to text her and let her know that this happened. I don't want her finding out just on her feed.
Well, yeah. And she had a great piece on rezonings and how it's really difficult when you're repurposing and consolidating and rezoning, but how important that is. It kind of just actually, aligns right with what we were talking about today too.
Well,
absolutely.
Thank you so much. And I'm glad this remote recording wasn't a complete disaster. Other than when I did the thing that I haven't told anyone that I did, which I messed something up. And
thank you for the last minute just hopping on. I really appreciate it.
Anytime you want to talk about education, I'm your girl.
Okay.
You're so wonderful. All right.
Have a good one. Bye.